Welcome to Scream Therapy. I'm your host, Jason Schreurs. In October of 2018, I found myself in the hospital, sitting across from a psychiatrist who was telling me I had bipolar. I was sent home with a bunch of medication and laid on the couch for a week. I had my iTunes library on shuffle, trying to shake the hornet's nest from my head. Ever since I was a kid, I've been using loud music as a form of therapy. Punk rock and mental health have always been connected. This podcast looks at that connection through the lens of different guests. This is Scream Therapy. For some people who get into the punk rock scene, it's a time and place in their lives to cope with whatever they're going through. Sometimes they move on from punk rock to what the next chapter of their mental health looks like. Or, like Cactus Vella, they stay put and spend decades holding on to punk rock when times get rough. Cactus spent his youth struggling with anxiety and panic attacks. In his adulthood, substance use issues became part of his fight. As he found awareness and understanding of his conditions, Cactus was able to stabilize his life. He now works in the mental health sector. Cactus has over 40 releases as a solo artist and member of bands like Public Mess and Sinking Ships. Through the ups and downs, punk has always been there for Cactus.
I'm Cactus Vella, and punk rock for me has always been part of my life since my mid-teens, I guess. When I was 8, my dad took me to see Johnny Cash, and I don't think you walk away from a Johnny Cash concert at that young of an age the same.
I hear the train a-coming, it's rolling around the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom prison, and time keeps dragging on. But that train keeps a-rolling on down to San Antone.
Obsessed with music and guitars from that point on. And, around 11, I discovered Guns N' Roses. And that led me to punk rock, believe it or not. I'd see these photos of Guns N' Roses wearing Misfits and Sex Pistols t-shirts. And I was like, I'm curious about that right there. Got into punk rock right at high school and started playing in bands pretty early on, grade 9, playing in punk rock bands, listening to the likes of Bad Religion, Leatherface, The Misfits, Screeching Weasel. I started playing in a band called Bomb Shelter when I was back in high school. And since then, I've played in Sinking Ships, The Class Assassins. I currently play in a band called Plan 37, and I play in an acoustic punk band called Public Mess. There's been a whole slew of other bands in between those. In my early teenage years, I began suffering from anxiety and panic attacks, and my mind became a loop of replaying conversations and scenarios that didn't go well, and trust began to break down with many individuals who I once considered friends. This was the mid-1990s, and we didn't talk about mental health that much. It wasn't an easy topic to discuss. The stigma was real. I lived in a small town called Woodbridge, which was about 30 minutes north of Toronto, and I was playing in a hardcore band called Bomb Shelter. Music was my form of therapy. The more I played, the better I felt. But of course, it's post-high school and people have lots going on, or you're discovering all kinds of things at that point. So we didn't play as much as I would have preferred. So I started putting together a solo acoustic set. And that was a way for me to play more often. And eventually the band broke up. I left home, moved to Toronto without a job, and just started busking nightly to make my rent.
You mentioned how you found punk rock and through different bands, and also how punk rock was a place for you to get some therapy and I would imagine to feel safe in that container. At that point, people didn't really talk about mental health issues. I always felt like for me, like punk rock was the place that I gravitated towards because somehow subconsciously I knew that that was where I could eventually be myself and actually deal with these things and feel comfortable. But of course, back then it was like, I'm a punk, I'm a weirdo, but why?
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. And even though we didn't talk about it much, I can clearly recall walking down the hallways of my high school, and we had a very rich punk rock scene. It was a very big scene. And I remember seeing some of the people and looking at them and looking past the shell and being like, this person looks broken down. This person's got a lot going on. I can tell behind those eyes. And it made you feel safe. Even if we didn't talk about it, I knew that we were all going through stuff, and not to judge a book by its cover, and like not to make assumptions. You definitely felt like there was a family vibe. There was, like, we didn't talk about it, but you knew like you're not alone. You just knew you weren't alone when you looked at some of the individuals in the punk rock community.
And everybody has their own path. And I'm sure some of those folks went on to move on to different things and maybe don't really follow with punk anymore or don't identify it as being punks. You've pretty much devoted your life to this ever since that point, more than 40 releases over the years. Why do you think it is that you were able to stick with that? And obviously, it's just a huge part of your life, even to this day.
Yeah, I'm so stubborn and determined to be able to to be able to do all the things in life that I want to do and enjoy them all. And what defines success? It's not about success. It's just doing the things you love to do, and who cares what level it's on. So, and I have so many passions, and punk rock has always been one of them. And even at this point in my life now, I'm into creating and documenting more than performing. I still play gigs, but everyone has a home studio now. Just to be able to write a song and record it and release it in such a quick time frame, just feel untouchable. I'm just like, we can do anything we want. We can just write and create and document it. Yeah, I don't plan on ever stopping, like not until the fingers fall off.
I always say that about going to shows as well. There's so many youth, and that's amazing. That's where it is. But I always joke that I'll be going to those shows when I'm in a walker, and it's true. I don't see myself ever stopping. Why would I at this point? It's always been part of my life. But I want to circle back to the anxiety and panic attacks that you started having, you said in your late teens. Do you remember
Yeah.
what it was like at that point, and what was the thoughts going through your head, other than the negative thoughts, but the rational thoughts when you were out of that negative spiral? Did you know what panic attacks were? Did you know what was going on with you?
No, I had no idea. I can remember while it was happening, wanting to say, help me, to anyone that was around me, to the people that I might have been lashing out at, or the people that were whatever the scenario was. And when it was all said and done, I remember it felt like I had been in like a 20-minute MMA fight or something. Like I just remember being like completely deprived of any energy and just felt exhausted and weak in the knees. And I remember just angry and confused and sad. I didn't know. I remember one of them clearly. It was just after a gig. We were in the Kensington Market in Toronto, and we just played a gig. And I went out back to get some fresh air, and some bandmates and some friends were just around the corner. And I overheard them saying, he's having a panic attack. Somebody needs to talk to him about this. And that was the first time I had ever heard the term panic attack. And then I had some at home in front of my mother, which breaks my heart to this day when I think about it, because she didn't know what they were and what was going on. It's very tough for a teenager to go through.
And at the time, punk rock was an anchor for you, it sounds like. Were you experiencing those same sorts of symptoms when you were in it? Because I know for me, when I play shows, a lot of that stuff goes away. The depression, I live with bipolar, so depression and manic moods tend to settle, at least now that I'm medicated. Before I was medicated, it was a whole different story. But finding that flow state in playing the music.
Definitely, it was never an issue while I was on stage. But the times that it would creep into a band practice, or like the one instance I said, which was right after a gig. Those were the times that bothered me the most after the fact, because I'm like, it's creeping into the music. The music has always been the thing that's kept it away or that made it not even matter. The music was the therapy, and now it's sneaking into the therapy. So it was very confusing. And that's when you start looking at the bigger picture. As a teenager, it's hard to look at the bigger picture. We're not equipped to do that yet. Our brains haven't formed in that sense yet, right? Where you stand back and look at things and go, what exactly is it? And it's not about pointing blame, but it's like, how do we avoid this? What happened here? Fortunately, the music most of the time was the thing that kept me grounded. Definitely.
How did it shift for you when you got into your 20s and knew more about the condition as well?
Well, yeah. Well, so the band broke up. I left home and I moved to Toronto, like I was saying. And I don't know to this day how much of a role this played, but I had a best friend at the time. I had this great friend, and she had become a homeopathic doctor. And she was just like, Cactus, before you go and do anything or try anything or whatever, can I just try a remedy on you? And I was like, of course. And she gave me a remedy. It was some this natural homeopathic remedy I was supposed to take. Again, I don't know how much of an effect it had or what it did because it opened up more doors. It got me thinking. So during the like period of time when I had to keep taking these little things, it also allowed me to sit back and think about what was going on. Was there a placebo effect there too, where like I was just like the bigger picture was the fact that I was focusing on what was going on and thinking about it, and I didn't want to be that person anymore. I'm not sure what happened. Then I landed a steady job, which took a lot of my attention and made me feel very useful. And I just started doing other things. And before I knew it, I wasn't having regular attacks anymore. They would come and go here and there, but it almost felt normal, whatever that means. They were so few and far that it wasn't a big deal to me.
It's inspiring to hear that you're able to find ways to deal with the anxiety and panic attacks. Do you still have them to this day, or is it something that's in the past?
I don't have the attacks. Anxiety is definitely something I live with. My anxiety is a little different. I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm willing to bet it's there because interrupt people,
Yeah.
impatience sometimes. I think I'm multitasking, but then I'm getting nothing done. There's like, but there's definitely some anxiety, a little bit of not fear, but my mother had massive anxiety and it was never diagnosed and we didn't understand it. And I didn't even understand it until it was happening with me. And then I was like, oh, this is what's been going on with mom for all these years. Again, no one even spoke about it at all back then. So maybe it's something in the family. I don't know. But now that I'm a parent, I'm just like, okay, don't be like that. But yeah, I definitely have some anxiety still, and it's undeniable. But I find being self aware is like the first step towards just trying to at least keep it at bay and control it a bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
If I had been more aware of what was going on with me, I wouldn't have been diagnosed in my late 40s. I would have probably been diagnosed in my 20s.
Exactly.
You mentioned ADHD, and I also live with that. And it was strange to go into the psychiatrist and give a list of symptoms and her just be, yep, there you go, here's your medication.
Really.
But not really knowing that parsing out the bipolar and the ADHD was a thing, and also not really thinking about some of these symptoms you mentioned, like, what am I doing right now? Like, where are things? And wandering around trying to figure out what it was that I was doing and being impatient and all these things. So I hear you on that.
There's actually more to the story, though, still. Once I started getting everything under control and I felt things were going smoothly for a while, we get to the early 2000s and I'd overcome most of my struggles. And then casual fun started spiraling into something a little more dangerous for me. And we enter the world of addiction. And with addiction comes a resurgence of mental health. Cocaine psychosis becomes a frequent presence in my life. Paranoia, suspicion. Despite this, I continue playing. And at this point, I'm playing in bands like Sinking Ships and the Class Assassins, and we're touring, we're releasing music, we're doing everything that a band does. And the stage still serves as a safe place for me. And it's a place that I can be me and cast away the weight of the mental health struggles just for a little while. It's interesting because anxiety itself becomes the most undeniable influence on me as a musician. Up until that point, if someone said, "What are your influences?" I'd be like, "Oh, well, definitely Leatherface." And I'd name all the artists that inspired me. I remember being in this recording studio and listening to my guitar track back, and the producer just being like, "You have a way of playing guitar." He's like, "There's something very subtle in there that I haven't heard before." And I'm like, "What is it?" And he's like, "I don't know." And he's like, he looks at me. He's like, "What do you think it is?" And I'm like, "Anxiety." And we all started laughing. And I remember walking away going, anxiety has now become the biggest influence on my guitar playing. If you listen to just my style, and I'm not sitting here saying like, "Oh, I'm great" or nothing, because I'm not. But if you listen to my style and if you hear some of the little nuances and things I'm doing, that's a product of anxiety. That's a product of a mind grappling with itself. During this period, I completely stopped performing solo. Addiction stole my voice. And so I could get on stage as a lead guitarist in a punk rock band and totally have no problem. But to get on stage as a solo artist with my acoustic guitar and try to sing my songs was no longer an option. So losing that part of myself was heartbreaking. But after several years of addiction, I got clean. The battle was pretty intense. I received some support, but even then, the stigma kept me from fully engaging. So I didn't take advantage of the support fully. And I had lost several friends in the process of getting clean. But then all these old friends that I thought were gone forever came back. So there was a strange trade off. I immediately started playing solo again, and my songs became stories. I tried to shine a light on the darker side and corners of life.
Yeah.
And then I began to take my career more seriously. I'd always been a graphic designer, but music had been my priority. So I didn't even think that far into the future. I went back to school and studied graphic design. I started freelancing and managing design contracts. I even called my own business Anxiety Attack Designs as a
Yeah.
way of taking control and ownership over the one thing that held me down, right? I eventually land a design contract with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada, which was a great experience. And it gave me a taste for working with charities and nonprofits. And from there, I went on to work with an organization called EVAs, who works with homeless and at-risk youth. And during that journey, it was great because my experiences really came out and I was able to talk with a lot of young people about some of the things they were going through, even though that wasn't even in my job description.
You're punk, you got to help people no matter what.
That's exactly it. Shortly after that, I got married, bought a house, I had a child. None of this stuff would have been possible if I hadn't have gotten clean. A couple of years ago, I accepted a full-time position as the national designer for the Canadian Mental Health Association. They're definitely the leaders in the space of mental health within Canada. So it just feels like my journey has come full circle, allows me to contribute meaningfully to a cause close to my heart and make a living while doing it. I feel very fortunate I get to do all the things I love. I get to be a designer, I get to be a musician, I get to be a husband and father. So I've learned that mental health is nothing to take for granted. And it's a serious, serious topic. And it's a serious thing that needs to be spoken about and talked about openly. There shouldn't be the stigma. People shouldn't be afraid to ask for help or to talk about their experiences.
It sounds like there's a Venn diagram for your life where the mental health and the music and the family and all these things kind of Venn diagram together. And that's pretty cool. I like to hope that my life is like that as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about how when you're writing songs, especially when you're coming out of a lot of like really tough times earlier in life, that you would use the songs as an outlet to talk about darkness and the struggles. Is that something that's still happening now, or how has that shifted?
Yeah, it's still there. It's funny too. The two bands I play in right now, I play in Plan 37, where I do lead guitar and backup vocals. And then I have Public Mess, where the singer for Plan 37 is my lead guitarist and doing my backups. We trade for each other. And in Public Mess, I recently wrote a new song and it wasn't complete. I got this vocal idea, but it's not really there. So I just sent him the demo and with all the vocals, but no chorus. And I was like, what do you have? Do you have anything in mind? What would you drop in there? And he starts writing some stuff down and he's in his apartment with his girlfriend. And his girlfriend's like, what are you doing? Cactus's song, even though it's dark, has a rise above feel to it. There's a, we'll get through this. He's pointing out all the things that are messed up, but he's saying there's a perseverance aspect to it. He's like, but you're just doing negative, negative, negative. And when he came back and told me that, we had a good chuckle about it because I was just like, yeah, I do paint a picture of the underbelly of things, but I try to always have that aspect of rise above, one fist in the air kind of thing, right? No matter what's going on. So yeah, it's still there in my storytelling to this day.
And you've been part of a tradition that's been passed down. So bands like Rancid and Leatherface. Those are also bands that do those types of things in their music. So it makes sense that you would have that message and that outlook on life. If you'd listened to other types of music or even other types of punk, you may have had a different outlook.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I love Off With Their Heads, for example.
There are no words to describe the awful feeling I have inside, so I'll shut down. Not the same as it was last time. It's so much worse. It's something that drives me out of my mind. It's a long way back to be anything that anyone could love.
Those are some dark lyrics at times, right? Like, I love it. But I'm like, whoa, that gets heavy. There's no turning around from some of those songs.
I had Ryan Young on the podcast a couple years ago. It was great.
Yeah, Ryan's an awesome dude. I've met him a couple of times now, and he's been great.
How does your punk music reflect your mental health journey? Do you see, obviously, a correlation between the two, but how does the music reflect what you've been through?
I think it's uncontrollable. Sometimes when I'm listening to some music, stuff that's my current favorite music or whatever it is, and then I'm writing at the same time, and I'll have a moment where I'm like, I don't exactly write what I listen to. They're not always the same. You try to break out of your writing and you realize I'm saddled with this. This is who I am as a writer. You can only change it so much because it's in your DNA now. This has been my life, like where I am now. And it's all had such an effect on me that I write only this way. It's because of what I've been through and who I am. And this is how I write. It's really interesting that it's just there. Just like it affects the way you speak. It affects the way you think. All these things, the way you look, right? So my journey and my mental health definitely plays a role. It's out of my control sometimes with what I write.
Working with the Canadian Mental Health Association must be rewarding and validating considering what you've been through in your life.
It's great. I've worked at a lot of places in my life, and the term work-life balance gets thrown around a lot, and it's just an HR catchphrase most places.
Yeah.
It truly means something at the Canadian Mental Health Association. Like if any organization is going to look after their staff and make sure we're not burning out or stressing out or whatever, it's this place. So in terms of the care and just the compassion they show towards their employees, it's second to none that I've ever experienced. What we do is so crucial. I'm proud to work there. They try to hire people with lived experience. I remember on the application form, there was like a spot to discuss your lived experience if you wanted. And I was like, this is different. It's a great organization. I'm proud of the work they do. It's been a wonderful experience for me. And just to be a designer doing something, as a designer, you can work anywhere. I could go and design for the Toronto Maple Leafs, or I could design for CIBC Bank. You choose where you want to hang your hat and where you want to work and who you want to work for. And so it's good to know that I'm contributing to an organization that might be making a difference in people's lives.
Summer, don't let me go. I gotta feel
That was my conversation with Cactus Vella, cactusvellamusic.com. For more episodes of Screen Therapy, go to screentherapyhq.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Big news, the Screen Therapy book is available now. Screen Therapy, A Punk Journey Through Mental Health, tells my story and the stories of others who use punk as a catalyst for mental health. Like this podcast, it links the community-minded punk scene with the mental wellness of the punks who belong to it. To order the book, go to screentherapyhq.com. For merch, check out Screen Therapy on TeePublic. Okay, enough promoting, it's time for some thanking. Thank you for listening to Screen Therapy. Doing this podcast and talking to folks about punk rock and mental health has been a crucial part of my own mental stability, and it means so much to me that you're out there listening. Screen Therapy is created in the Cathet region of coastal British Columbia, Canada, on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. Contact me at screentherapyhq.com or email me at screentherapypodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Let's talk about punk rock and mental health. Until next time, take care and be well.